In this episode, we continue our examination of Mike Bynum and begin to unpack the contradictions and his perspective in the Intruder defense. Bynum, at about 5'10", 175 pounds, similar in build to Lou Smith, raises a key question. If people like Linda Hoffman Pugh or Bill McReynolds were the so-called intruders, how would they manage to climb through the small basement window, especially in a hurry? More importantly, why would they even need to? According to Bynum, they wouldn't, because he claims the Ramsey home had many entrances, and many of those doors had simple push-button locks. In his walkthrough with Diane Sawyer, he seems to suggest that an intruder could have just walked right through one of those unsecured entry points. We'll look closely at the logic, or the lack thereof, behind this argument, and whether Bynum's statements hold up under scrutiny. Then, as we close out our deep dive on Bynum, we'll revisit his awkward attempt to list possible intruder methods, a list that Diane Sawyer quickly dismantles on air, leaving his theory falling apart in real time. From there, we'll shift briefly to the topic of JonBenet's unexplained injuries and allegations that she may have been hit by a hamster cage. The bruises, the recurring doctor visits, the oddities, they keep showing up. The final thread will lead us directly into our next episode, where we will begin a deeper examination of JonBenet's medical history and her relationship with her pediatrician, Dr. Francisco Buff. Welcome back, welcome in. So in our last episode, we analyzed some of the key moments from the ABC Primetime Live. It was our second analysis, looking specifically at Mike Bynum, where we saw how direct questions about JonBenet Ramsey were either avoided or softened, sort of keeping the focus on protecting the public image of John and Patsy Ramsey. And so then we kind of broke down how the Ramseys intentionally bypassed police channels entirely and instead went straight to CNN, using the media, really and truly is what they were doing, using the media to shape their defense before cooperating fully with the investigation, kind of looking to win by public opinion. The court of public opinion is what they were trying to do. Mike Bynum, who we've been talking about, once again, was the center, sort of framed the Ramseys in this sort of catch-22 idea that if they do this, then they can't win. If they don't do this, then they can't win. And I was like, why, if you cooperate with the investigation, why would that be a catch-22? Why would that be a loss? Who would criticize you for cooperating with the investigation? I mean, other than your attorneys. And so we kind of talked about that, where Bynum goes into this idea that the Ramseys, or he seems to hint at this idea that the Ramseys may have been in deep legal trouble when Sawyer asked, why won't you just go to the police? And why can't they just go tell everything they know? And Bynum said, well, under normal circumstances, they could, but in this case, they can't. And so that begs the question, why not? And so they're kind of in this catch-22. And we also examined Bynum's contradictory stance, saying he wanted nothing more to do with the case, yet he continued to publicly steer its narrative. And finally, we challenged the long-standing claim that the FBI wasn't involved early on, showing instead that the Boulder Police Department had already been working with the FBI before the end of 1997. And so we're going to close our analysis of Mike Bynum and his statements today as they pertain to the ABC Primetime Live interview with Diane Sawyer. And like we mentioned, we're going to start by looking at what we talked a little bit before, so kind of we might glaze over it. We might go into it in depth, but about the place in which the intruder came in and the possibility. Now, we've talked about this last episode. We talked about it on other podcasts, and we kind of laughed and joked about it. This idea that you have Bill McReynolds, and you have Linda Hoffman Pugh as individuals who are targeted, who are mentioned by the Ramseys as possible suspects. And they are two of the individuals who are targeted as having snuck in the house and maybe straight through the front door and then snuck out of the window right under, our noses. We couldn't even with John Ramsey being gone for an hour and a half and looking over the top to try to get a view of the intruder and try to see if there's anything that was weird. Even with him being gone for that hour and a half, nothing was able to be seen during that time period from anyone in the house, cops included. As we know in the police reports, cops were trying to canvass the area, trying to ask people questions. Nobody saw anything. At some point in time, I've taken notes. At some point in time, we're going to take a little bit of what I might call a field trip through some of the videos done by Paula Woodward or one of her website. I think when Lou Smith was kind of doing the video and of the tour with the Ramsey's house, and kind of asked some questions and clear some questions about where John may have been and some possible entry points. So what Bynum is doing here is essentially taking Diane Sawyer through the house and just kind of saying, okay, hey, here's where, this could have happened and so on and so forth. So as we mentioned last time, Bynum says, as you can see, or we'll start with Sawyer. Let me see where I want to start. Sawyer said, okay, Bynum believes most leaks are intended to hurt the Ramseys and said he would show us the house address errors in published reports. Show us the house to address errors in published reports. He pointed out it's a house with a lot of entrances. He says the Ramseys didn't always turn on the alarm, and a lot of the locks are simple push buttons, not deadbolts. And though it's been called a mansion, the rooms are large but not huge. Many of them added on by the Ramseys. Bynum particularly wanted to point out a window in the basement because he said press reports have it all wrong. Bynum says the basement window. People have been told that there's no way to get in or get out of there. That's a lie. Sawyer says he said several months before the murder, John Ramsey broke a window here because he had locked himself out. One pane was still broken the night of the murder. Though this is a substitute window, police have the original. Okay. Bynum says, as you can see, this window opens to an opening that is, as I showed you earlier, easy enough to get in and out of for a person at least my size, 5'10", 175. So, and then the grate up above, I'll show that to you as well. That's the grate that's the grate that was also taken, and the new grate's been put up there, and I had that locked, so it's no longer movable. Oh, he had it locked, so he's running things. And so Diane wants to clarify though. So the grate was loose the night of the murder though. Now it's locked, but it was loose though, is what you're telling me. And Bynum says, yeah, it was loose. Sawyer says, and to get up to the window, Bynum says, you can either hoist yourself up or step on an object such as this suitcase. And one of this nature was down here. Sawyer says, and you think you could get out without leaving any fabrics of your clothes or any skin? Talking about touch DNA. It's a very good question. Talking about touch DNA. Bynum says, well, I don't know what you can or can't do. I just know this is a rather easy means of access to the home, as there are a number of other locations that I've showed you. And Diane says, and where was everyone sleeping that night? So this is where the bed was. Bynum says, that's correct. So with the suggestion that the entrances to the home are many, suggesting that essentially what the intruder could have done is kind of move freely throughout the house. So if there are many entrances, it doesn't really matter where you come in. We don't even know at that point if there are many entrances to where they could have come in. We truly don't know if there's any how do we know if the intruder came through the window? We don't know that. I mean, we have to. I was looking at one of the videos of the house tour, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I was looking at one of the videos of the house tour, and in the bathroom of the basement, you go downstairs of the basement, and I have it. I guess I can just the schematics here. When you go down to the basement of the stairs, here's the basement. So you're coming down from the first floor and you're going down the stairs. Pop, 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 pop. There's a room right here. You see this little door? There's a room right here. This room is a bathroom. In this bathroom is a window that has a latch on it. In front of this window is a toilet. The toilet, now I would say this window, man, I'll be honest with you, this window for somebody 5'10", 175, if you can get through this, I would guess that you could probably get through this. I know it looks small, but I would guess that you can get through this, to be honest with you. If you can get through this at 5'10", 175, that's because when we're saying that, we're limiting, because Lou Smith barely got through that. And you're talking about a guy at 5'10", 175, and Mike Bynum, he would probably barely get through that too. And so now we're sort of shifting down this individual to somebody who's pretty slender, because otherwise you probably can't get through that. And if you can get through that, you can probably get through this. This individual would have come downstairs, popped into here, closed this door, and would have been able to kind of shield themselves for a second to unlock this door or unlock this window and pop through the window. So that could have been another means, if we're talking about multiple entrances, that could have been another means in which the intruder came in. Doesn't necessarily have to come through here just because it's a broken window. Doesn't necessarily have to come through here just because the grate is movable. Again, if we're talking about someone coming through here, they had to walk around. This is an individual who knew very well. If you look at the layout of the house, this is an individual who knew very well. I'm almost like certain. If there was an intruder, this individual knew extremely well the house, because if we go up to the first floor, this is where it was. You see the breakfast room, right? This is hold on, let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Oh, that's the biggest it goes. This is the breakfast room. This is the kitchen. You go right here, there's a door right here. And obviously when we do our little field trip, we're gonna see it clearly. There's a door right here. There's a back door right here. If this was unlocked, the intruder could have walked right through here, went straight ahead and gone upstairs. Gone upstairs to the second floor, because spiral staircase is right here. Gone upstairs. Here's Melinda's room. They would have went straight to JonBenet's room. This is somebody who would have been well aware of the game plan. And I'm going to show you just a second Mike Bynum's assertion about this intruder. Because when I say we got to nail it down, we can't just talk in abstract terms. We got to nail this down. Where did this individual come through? If there's many entrances, we got to nail it down to probability. Number one. Number two, the Ramseys had a security system that they said they didn't lock. Help me out here, chat. for those of you who have had a security system, help me out here. The security system that I had, when I was in my home in Texas, the security system, and I got one of those install it yourself security systems, and then you call in and have them activated. When I set up my security system, there was, by the front door, you had your panel by the front door, and then you had like a little sensor on this side of the door, on one side of the door at the top, and a sensor on the actual door, kind of parallel. And when you open that door, it's just a simple beep beep. You know what I mean? It's just a simple beep. Now, I have an aunt who has a security system, and when you go in and out of the garage, it'll say front door, back door, garage door, left and right. So I guess what I'm saying, and I have another aunt who had a security system, and I remember one night I was trying to sneak out of the house, and and I was sneaking out of the house to go see a girl I was dating. And it's funny because my parents said, I think he's dating it. Before I went to my aunt's house, they said, I think he's dating this girl up there, make sure he doesn't sneak out and go see her or whatever. And so I was forbidden to see her. And but I waited till everybody in the house went to sleep, and I told my cousin, I said, man, I think I'm gonna sneak out. And he said, all right, man, just don't get in trouble. And so either before or after everyone went to sleep, I got up and went to the restroom. So I'm going to the restroom, and I actually go to the sliding door. They had an alarm system. I go to the sliding door, and I kind of crack the door open, and I crack it open, and I leave it open. And I just leave it cracked. And I run to the restroom, and I come out, or I go just lay down and I just wait. And nobody comes. And so I go through and I sneak out. I go to her house, whatever, jump the fence, whatever, go sneak out to her house and have fun and come back. And I'm trying to remember if when I came back, the door was closed. And I was like, what the heck? But I think the door may have been closed or what have you. And I think my uncle was slick, though, because I think he knew that I had snuck out, and he closed the door just to know when I was coming back in, maybe. But he knew I was out, so he didn't want to lock me out. And thinking back on it, he may have been slick. But I think I came back and the door was closed, and I was like, oh, no. And my heart kind of skipped a beat. But then I opened the door, and then I slid in really quickly, closed the door. And then I went to the room really quickly, went to my cousin's room really quickly, closed the door, and I laid down, boom, covered up. And then, man, not too long after, like I said, he must have known. Not too long after, he opens the door to my cousin's room, and I'm laying on the ground with the cover, and I'm just, not facing the door, but I'm laying, just kind of looking. And he kind of waits for a second, and then he closes the door and leaves. And then in the morning time, he said, hey, Junior, he said, you didn't sneak out of my house last night, did you? I was like, no, I didn't sneak out of your house or whatever. And he was like, all right, you better not be. But I think he knew. I think he really knew, honestly and truly. But I bring that story in to say that every alarm system, especially for somebody who's paying attention to their alarm system, every alarm system that I've encountered of my own and people who I know have one, those alarm systems make noise when people go in and out of the house at nighttime. John and Patsy, there was an alarm system by the front door. If I'm remembering correctly, there was an alarm panel. By the front door. There was an alarm panel by the garage door. There was an alarm panel on the third floor in John and Patsy's bedroom. So regardless of how tired they were, and John said the house was secure, regardless of how tired you were, not turning on the alarm, you had to force yourself not to turn the alarm on. That was a choice, because you weren't that tired to not want to turn that alarm on. That was a choice. And so for you to tell me, you must have, all of you guys must have been really knocked out to not hear anything when this person slipped in. But as you say, he may have slipped in earlier and whatnot. And so obviously if he slipped in before you, after you guys left, then of course you wouldn't have heard that. But slipping out through the window wouldn't have triggered that. So that makes sense. I'll give you that. So going back to this case, many entrances, basically what I noted, many entrances, but we're kind of having a discussion about the window. So suggested essentially the person could have come from anywhere. I'm going to jump back to that, but I want to move on to the second point. When pressed about telling more about what he supposes the intruder, what an intruder might have done, Bynum tries to sort of list things or talk about some of the things that may have happened, but Diane sort of very quickly dismantles those things. And Bynum ends by saying that he won't mention anything, even if he could. He said, I can, but I won't. And they're in JonBenet's room at this point. They're in JonBenet's room. They're upstairs. You remember he's taking her on a tour. They're in JonBenet's room at this point. And they go upstairs. They're in JonBenet's room. They're talking about the terrace. And Diane Sawyer says Patsy and John Ramsey's bedroom was there at the far end of their room, a converted attic. To get to their daughter's room, they had to walk this way, then downstairs to the second floor. Burke's bedroom is around the corner. JonBenet's is right here. And there's a terrace. I didn't know that there was a terrace here. Bynum says, absolutely, there's a terrace off of her bedroom, and then the door leading out onto the terrace. Sawyer comes back and says, this is that terrace from the outside. JonBenet's killer, whoever it was, presumably came into this bedroom, then took her across a small hall down the winding staircase where Patsy Ramsey would later say she found the ransom note. This is the stairs down to the kitchen. On the first floor, there are two options to reach the door to the basement: straight through the entrance foyer, or straight through the kitchen. Or you can kind of go straight through the kitchen, and I want to kind of take a look at that. So if you're coming through the foyer, or the foyer, foyer, depending on how you pronounce it, coming through the foyer, and you have your stairs, you can either hit the basement right here through the main entrance through the foyer, or he said straight through the entrance, or through the kitchen. I mean, that's kind of like the same thing. Or of course, coming through here, you can either go straight here and hit the basement. If you're coming through the front door, boom, boom. Or if you're coming from upstairs and you come down the spiral staircase, go through the kitchen, and boom, it'll be right here. And you can kind of go down that way, is essentially what he's saying. And so straight through the kitchen to this hallway, which is the entry to the basement, down these stairs. Yep. Want to go down? Yes. Okay. Bynum says, when you come down to the basement and you turn to your right, Sawyer says, we've sort of imagined this place all the time. To the right, that room with the broken window pane and the laundry rooms, and straight ahead, Bynum says, straight ahead from this landing is the basement. In this basement is actually the room where JonBenet's body was found. So Diane says it's a windowless room of concrete where some household supplies and golf clubs were said to have been stored. There used to be a door on it with a small latch at the top, but police took it as evidence. The room is not as hidden as some press reports suggest, yet still to find your way here, given the layout of the house, then doesn't it almost have to be someone who at least knew that had a kind of map in their head of the house? Bynum says, well, I don't know that for sure. That's certainly a possibility. I don't think that the house is one that is too difficult to be described, at least in terms of getting in and around the house. Now, Priscilla White did describe it as a confusing house. She said it took me a couple times to come here to know what the heck I was doing, to even, because it's very confusing. Like if you go through the video tour, and I can, yeah, I mean, well, I guess I'll show you at some other point. But if you go through the video tour, it's very confusing. You need these. You need the schema to know where you are. You know what I mean? Because there's so many. Oh, there's a room over here. Oh, there's a room off the corridor. There's over here. There's this, there's that. And it's like, man, this is a lot. So it's not as easy as Bynum is trying to tell us. So this person, and this is what I'm saying, we are shaving down the potential suspects of who this could be. We cannot just randomly say, oh, Linda Hoffman, oh, Bill McReynolds. No, this person has to be like 5'10". Well, it doesn't even have to be 5'10". This person has to be 175 or less. They have to be like 175. I'll give you 190. But they have to have a slender build to be able to fit through this window. So that's number one. Number two, they have to be somebody that's very, very, very familiar with this house. They do. And they have to be somebody that's jealous of John Ramsey. So they have to be somebody close to know this about the house. Who would that be? Any guesses? I mean, you might say, well, Fleet White, why would Fleet White be jealous of John? I got a daughter, you got a daughter. I got a son, you got a son. What's to be jealous for? I got a wife, you got a wife. We're coming from California. I mean, we know what it's like to live in the sun. We're down in Colorado. I used to, I'm an oil exec. What I have to be jealous of you for? You come to my house. There's no motive for Fleet White to be jealous, but Fleet was tall. Fleet was slender. So if we're looking at it purely from that perspective, then Fleet would fit that. But everything else would kind of fall by the wayside because, I mean, if you want to place him as an individual who, with the whole Nancy Krebs thing, then yeah, he would fit the box. But in terms of, you know, I wonder, now we have to say that his entire family is dishonest, because if he would have snuck out of the house, then, you know, Priscilla probably would have known, and she probably would have turned him in. If they're as honest as John and Patsy, who would have turned each other in, they've said. So Fleet probably would have gotten caught up if it was Fleet. But this individual was going to be somebody who's slender, has a slender build, probably around no more than 200 pounds if you have that slender build, and knows the house really well and is jealous of John Ramsey. And so Diane goes on to say, I just have to say this. They get on my nerves when they do this. When you ask them a question, they say, I don't know a lot. She says, you know, this is a very difficult house to get through, don't you think? Bynum says, I don't know that for sure. It's possible, but, you know, I don't think it's too difficult. There are some things that are just like objective truths. Like, this house is difficult to get through. It's confusing. That's just an objective truth. I think anybody who comes in this house first would find this. It's not like, you know, the cookie cutter homes of today where you come in, you see the stairs and you see the living room and you see the kitchen. Go straight out to the backyard. I go upstairs. Here's a living area upstairs. and the subsequently we go into the back room, the bedrooms and stuff like that. Here's a bathroom. It's easy for me to turn around and come back downstairs. It's that easy. But if you go up there, even on the third floor, they had a study in the floor on the third floor that I didn't even know about. I don't think I have the third floor. No, I don't think I have the third floor pulled up. Okay, so here's the third floor, and you have really two sets of stairs to the floors. You have, I think, stairs to the first and second floor. I think this is closer to the front of the house, where you can get to the front of the house, that entrance to the front of the house. But I think this leads to down to JonBenet's room, and then down that spiral staircase. This is John and Patsy's bed. This is John and Patsy's bed. Now, what I don't understand is why she would go down this staircase, which would lead to the spiral staircase and go by JonBenet's room, if you have no intent on waking JonBenet up. It would seem, because this is just as easily accessible. I mean, for Patsy to come down this way, this is the second floor. You have this staircase, which is the staircase closest to John and Patsy's bed. Stairs to the first and third floors. Very flexible. I can do everything I need right here. Stairs to the third floor, straight up, and then I have my spiral staircase. Oh, no. I'm sorry. This is stairs. This is second floor. Okay. Stairs to the third floor. That makes sense. This is the stairs that Patsy would come right here and then go down the spiral staircase to the first floor. And then she would end up right here on the first floor, right in front of the butler's pantry or the butler's kitchen. And then she would come through here and go through here to wake up and get her morning coffee. I don't understand that, because that's a longer route. If you're not going to stop by JonBenet's room and look in immediately, and you're not planning on waking up with the kids right now, why not just wake up? Your bedroom is right here. What was confusing to me was you have two bathrooms up here on this floor, and that's a luxury. They probably had that built in as a luxury, but you have, and then they call this a dressing room. I think this is a walk-in closet right here. But this is also kind of like Lou Smith described it as a study. But anyways, you have the bed right here, and over right here on this panel, you have the security alarm is right here, for the third floor. So very accessible. I mean, what's that take you to make sure if everything else is locked up? I mean, that's a couple steps. That's a couple steps. That's a couple steps to just make sure that the house is secure for the night. But apparently you were so tired and so exhausted that you didn't do it. So anyways, Patsy, if she was on this side of the bed, would have been easy enough to just go boom, doon, 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 all in one staircase. I don't have to jump from one staircase to the next. And then the kitchen is right here, the very next door. Boom. Because what you're going to do is you're going to come down the stairs, second stair to the second floor, and you're going to hit a landing spot, and you're going to come down some more. Door's right here. But here, you got to come all the way around, go through this hallway and then come through right here. Why would you do that? That's the long way around. That doesn't make any sense to me. So that's a little weird. But at any rate, that's a little confusing. But that at any rate, that's what he's talking about. It would seem like it would make sense to me for the intruder, especially since and let me make sure I'm not tripping here. You have the laundry, you have the stairs, and off the kitchen, I would say, because I'm proposing that Patsy would have come. This is the front door. I'm proposing that Patsy would have come down these stairs. She would have had a clear shot, and the kitchen is right here. Clear as day. She comes through the kitchen. Oh, we're on the second floor. Hold on. Okay, so I have it sped up just a little bit. I'm not really focused on the words, but I'm more so focused on the location.
Kitchen doorway, just off of the kitchen living room, looking down the steps leading to the basement door.
So we're in the kitchen, going down these steps to the basement.
Note the basement door swings right to left.
So the basement door swings from right here to left here, is what he's saying.
With the door standing open. Looking at the top couple of steps going down to the basement. There's a handrail leading down, the door open, the wall located west of the hallway. That lead up into the hallway from the front of the house toward the kitchen.
So here's a laundry room. This is closer to the, yep, okay. Stairs right here. And this will be coming through the foyer. I might suggest that there may be steps around here somewhere that might lead us, or what have you, in this area that might lead us down to the basement. Is what I might suggest. I would suspect, yeah, because it would be these stairs, I would say, going down to the basement. So we could go through here. This is the playroom or the train room, you know, storage, and then out the door here. And what you would do is you would come around this way. If you were trying to leave out the front, you would come around this way and run away. Or, I mean, I guess you could go out this way and leave, because the garage is back here as well. You could run away or run through the trees over here or something like that. And so this is kind of the possible path that the intruder may have taken. So there's a lot of options, quite honestly. And you have to be really familiar with the house. You have to be really comfortable with these options to kind of know. Because what we're suggesting here with the individual coming through the terrace of JonBenet's, and this is Bynum's, and that's why I said we have to lock this down. And like we talked about before, you guys remember in some of our previous analysis that when we were talking about Bill McReynolds, in the Bill McReynolds videos, that John seemed to suggest that the blinds, they're not the blinds, but the curtains that were in JonBenet's room by the second bed, where you have the Santa bear on the second bed and the life-size doll, or the big doll on that second bed of JonBenet's, the drapes weren't tied up on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side facing the curtain, those drapes you'll see weren't tied up on the left-hand side, but I think on the right-hand side they were. And so John was making a statement in the interviews. He was saying, well, this should have been tied up, I think that the intruder would have come through here. And what we have here on initially, so they wouldn't have walked through the front door like I've heard them say, having keys. What they're saying is that this individual would have come through. They would have climbed up on to the second stage, to the second floor, to get on JonBenet's terrace, is what John and Mike would be sort of presenting as a possible way in. This individual would have jumped up, found some way to get up on the second, having keys to the front door, mind you. Having keys to the front door. This is somebody that they knew, whether they were contractors and construction workers, having access to the house instead of using the keys. And this is what I'm saying. Like, what kind of criminal is this? This criminal needs to be studied. When we solve this mystery for JonBenet, this criminal needs to be studied, because this person this person is truly the definition of never let him know your next move. He really is. Like, he is really the definition of never let them know your next move, because who would show up? Who would show up with keys? Okay? Who would show up? Who would show up to a house of this magnitude with keys to the front door and say, nah, I don't want to go through the front door. You know what I want to do? I want to test my rock climbing skills. I will say there was a ladder over by the garage. Laying on the ground. It was behind some sort of fence or something like that. So maybe the contractors and, construction workers could have used it and then tossed it over there to make it seem like it was part of the scene. or something like that. Yeah. But anyways, this individual comes and he's like, yo, you know what? I have a key to the house, but I'm not going to use the key to the house. They're expecting me to use the key to the house. What I would do is I would jump up on JonBenet's on her terrace, make noise by trying to jimmy the lock open. But JonBenet's knocked out anyway, so it's fine. Go through the door, pick up JonBenet as Mike Bynum is suggesting, and keep moving. And when pressed about this, saying that, don't you think that somebody would have had to have a map in their head about this? Mike Bynum says, I don't know. Well, it's been almost a year. What have you guys been thinking about? Like it's been almost a year. What have you guys really been thinking about to this point? I'm confused. But anyways, I think that's hilarious. But Bynum says, well, about the evidence. Well, she kind of presses on him and she says, but is there any real evidence of an intruder? What is the evidence that there is an intruder? There's no fiber sample. There's no DNA. There's no evidence of forced entry. I got to ask you this on live television. Bynum says, well, you know more about the evidence apparently than I do. Why are you getting offended? Why are you getting offended? I'm just asking you. What would make you guys have a problem with getting offended at people when people state the obvious and they say, I mean, there's no DNA evidence. There's no fibers of this individual. This individual didn't leave any skin cells or touch DNA or anything on that suitcase. There's no forced entry. What would make us think that there's an intruder? Because I was asking myself with the door, I was like, what would make you go down into the basement? Was the door open already or was the door closed? What would make you what would make you go to the basement immediately? And I guess that's what's confusing me, because like there has to be a reason why you decide to do something. Like what makes you, because Linda Arndt said search the house from top to bottom and you went straight to the basement. Was the door to the basement open or something like that that encouraged you to go down to the basement? These are questions that inquiring minds want to know. And he says, he gets a little offended and says, well, apparently you know more about the evidence than I do. Can't have a solid conversation about anything with these people. And so he says, I don't think it's known what there is or is not. I said there's no evidence. I'm asking you for evidence. Is there evidence? Essentially what she's saying is, do you have evidence to show me that there is an intruder? If so, because Lou Smith would have been like, well, we think about the stun gun and we think about this window over here. We think the person came through here and we think they used this suitcase. But if we really stop and think about it, that's a good question. Like if somebody asks you, what evidence is there of an intruder? And she's coming with something like, there's no fiber, there's no DNA, there's no forced entry. This gets him up in arms. And he's basically like, well, you know more than I do. But essentially he tries to respond with the John Ramsey school of responses by saying, well, we don't know what there is. I'm telling you, Mike, that there's no evidence of these things. That's what I'm saying to you. That's what I'm suggesting. Your job then would be to come back and say, well, no. That's not true. We have evidence of this. We have evidence of that. Those are just a couple of things that I want to mention right now without just going too deep into the case. But there's evidence that the intruder could have done this or whatever. That's what you could have responded with, especially to this point. They said they knew the DNA cleared them, and they said that they knew about the unknown male DNA to this point. This is in 1997, in September 10th of 1997, and you're telling me the Ramsey clan, the Ramsey legal team, and John Ramsey, they're saying that we already knew, and Susan Stein as well, they're saying we already knew that the DNA cleared the Ramseys, but they didn't cleared us, but the police wouldn't tell us. We had to find out on our own. So you knew the DNA cleared you. Then you can say, well, hold on. We know that from the DNA that we've been told, our sources have told us that there's an unidentified male DNA. That's evident, and it didn't match to any of the Ramseys. The police know that, and that hasn't been leaked yet, but the police know that. And so that's evidence that there's an intruder. Boom, right there. You give her something to think about. But again, you could have said something, but you didn't. All of these missed opportunities where the Ramseys and the Ramsey clan could have said something, could have corrected something, but didn't. That does not make sense, because you're missing opportunities left and right. Remember, like we said on Steve Thomas's, on the Larry King interview with Steve Thomas, and Steve Thomas said one time, he said, how do you know, John? You weren't there. And then John let it pass. But then the second time, when Steve Thomas said, and people was like, oh, don't be so nitpicky. When Steve Thomas said, John, how do you know you weren't there? And John responded, yes, I was. And he didn't correct it, didn't clean it up, left it out there. And like I said, I don't want to be nitpicky. All I'm saying is that, man, when we're talking about the murder of a child and who wasn't there, and you're telling me that the brother was asleep, and then you're also telling me that you were there, but then the brother comes back and says, oh yeah, I actually got back up. And by the way, somebody slipped in here and slipped out the door, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear an alarm, anything. This person had a key to the door, to the front door, and chose to sneak out of the window. Make it make sense. And so when pressed about this, he says, we don't know what the evidence says. I mean, what John Ramsey does, because John Ramsey is reading everything. Y'all are pressing the police because to not know anything, y'all know a lot. John Ramsey telling on himself. Oh, we don't know anything. I think this guy has a theory. But let me tell you about the police reports that the police updates that I read. Oh, I thought you didn't know anything about the case. Oh, I don't. But let me tell you what the autopsy report said. I thought you said you didn't. I thought you said you didn't read the autopsy report. Oh, I didn't. But let me tell you about what the DNA evidence says. So do you know about the case? You know about the case or not? Because you're telling me one thing and you're hitting me with facts. And so when you're hit with facts that are really good ones, he responds and says, oh, I don't think we know anything at this point. I think there are things in terms of actions of this individual in that house. He's trying to speak in very abstract terms. But Diane is too quick and too sharp for that. I think there are in terms of actions of this individual in that house, they're in the house. In that house that the note was left. That really has been very, very secret from the public. Why do we need to? Why do we need first of all? Why do we need to know about the note? Second of all, if the cops have it. Second of all, how does that improve it? How does that prove an intruder? The cops are saying that the note was doctored. How does that, again, to Diane's point, how does that prove that there's an intruder? That response was not substantive at all. The note was left. That proves an intruder, and that, it's been held a secret. So what? It still doesn't, whether it's a secret or not, doesn't prove that it's an intruder. Secondly, when you say, oh, the actions of the individual in the house, he was a phantom. He got in and got out without a trace. He wiped JonBenet down, except for in some areas, wiped her down, brought her downstairs, committed murder, and then left out the window. Didn't even leave fingerprints. Melinda's handprint was on the wine cellar. Her handprint was on the wine cellar. But this individual touched the window and slid his body on that window, and there's no DNA there. Not even touch or skin, nothing. There's no DNA. This individual is a phantom. Impossible. Slides in. We don't know anything about this individual. So what actions are we talking about? So Diane says, can you, because since we want to speak in abstract terms, can you be a little bit more clear for me at least? Diane says, can you tell me anything more about what you mean by the actions of that person in the house? Because he's trying to, this is that suggestive stuff. Instead of speaking in clear terms, they suggest something and they want you to run with it and make up your own theory. I'm not going to let you do that. Tell me what you mean. She says, can you tell me what you mean by the actions of the person in the house? He says, no, I cannot. No, I will not. I suppose I can, but I won't, because he knows how it's going to come off. This aggressiveness. The lady didn't ask you. The lady didn't ask you to solve 849 times 849 on the spot. She just said, and she's not questioning your intelligence. She just said, well, what do you mean by the actions? You're saying, bro, we're having a conversation about an intruder coming in the house, and you're convinced that there's an intruder coming in the house. I am saying, what evidence do we have of that? And instead of being direct, you say, well, there's these actions by this person. I don't know what you mean by that, because you speak in very abstract terms. Hey, John, there are some legal issues. Abstract. What would that be? Be more specific. Can you give examples? The Ramseys, I guess under normal circumstances, the Ramseys could have, went straight to the cops and helped. But under these circumstances, no. What circumstances are they in? What circumstances are they in that would have prevented them from going to the police? And then here, third time is a charm. The actions of this person in the house. What does that mean? Oh, I'm not going to tell you. I won't tell you. Not no, but heck no. Is very much giving over my dead body. That's the energy Mike Bynum is giving. And for what? You're calling the cops aggressive and hostile, but this is hostile behavior. I'm not telling you nothing. No, you're not getting an interview. Is it a crime for me to, as a officer of the law, to ask or request an interview? Is it a crime? No. So why are you talking to me like that? Why are you getting mad? I'm doing my job. You act like I'm not doing my job. That's weird. And then when Diane Sawyer, these are people asking regular questions and getting their head bitten off. Normal questions. No, I'm not going to do it. So when somebody pressures you about this theory that you're trying to suggest, you really have nothing to say. And so you kind of resort to, or I can tell you, but I'm not. I could, but I won't. I don't have to tell you. Childish games of, no, you're not going to make me tell you. I don't care. And you know how it comes off on TV. And so you says, I suppose I can, but I won't. Tell me what? Because this is not anything new. It wouldn't be anything new that they haven't talked about on TV in various forums, right? Hey, we think that Somebody came in. We think that they unalived her, and we think that they did it in this way. We think they assaulted her first, and then we think that they used the weapon of this choice, and then simultaneously they were using this weapon to unalive her. That's essentially, and then we saw, this on her body. It's evidence of this. That's all you have to say. But Bynum, with this sort of shadiness, makes it seem as if you're trying to hide something from me. And so when pressed about this issue, he really has nothing substantial to say. So you just showed up with really, really unprepared is really what you did. And so this last point that I want to make is about bruises on JonBenet and bruises on her arm attributed to a hamster cage. And so it says, Diane Sawyer says, two things have probably caused the most speculation about JonBenet Ramsey's mother, Patsy. First, the ransom note. Reportedly, John Ramsey's handwriting has been ruled out, while hers cannot be, though the Ramseys have contradicting experts of their own. The second is general unease about her role in sending a little girl into the beauty pageants, 9 in 2 years. JonBenet's pediatrician told us the mother and daughter relationship was extremely loving, but the tabloids have been a constant search for signs of maternal control and temper. This was a pageant in 1996. A bruise noted on JonBenet's arm. A friend of the family's said a hamster cage had fallen on her. And then she goes on to say, did you see the bruise to Dr. Buff? And that's when he comes in. A hamster cage fell on her? What was JonBenet doing to where a hamster cage just fell on her? This, I feel like we're getting to the point to where JonBenet is either clumsy or there's multiple scenarios in which JonBenet is being abused in some way. And I'm not saying who's doing the abuse. I'm just saying that there seems to be a lot of physical activity around JonBenet to where she gets hurt. Let me be more specific. The hamster cage falls on her. And then we note an instance, and they explain that away. Then we note an instance in which Burke was apparently playing golf, and JonBenet apparently walked up behind him, as Patsy's going to tell you in the interview. JonBenet walked up behind him. He didn't even know. And he kind of swings backwards and hits her in the face. Now, obviously, kids are going to be kids. Kids are going to get into some stuff, for sure. But how does it seem like JonBenet is getting beat up all the time? And then we go into this thing of as we'll go into next time, of JonBenet going to the pediatrician. So just like this bruise on her face, what we're contributing to her as her fault from Burke, I'm wondering if this animal cage, this hamster cage falling on her, is that considered JonBenet's fault as well? Are we explaining all of these instances away as this is JonBenet's fault? And so I can say this may not have been an attack out of nowhere. So when we think about what JonBenet's been through, and we think about what she went through in death, this may not have been an attack out of nowhere. The constant private area trauma, I'll call it, the constant private area trauma and things magically injuring her may suggest that she was being roughhoused on a regular basis, possibly. So it's not just as we think, oh man, but is there a history? Is it coming out of nowhere? Now, we talked about the history of reported abuse and stuff like that very, very briefly, I believe, on one of the previous episodes. And John was on I think the Larry King episode, one of the Larry King episodes, when John was saying most of the time the abuse, there's a historical context to the abuse. It's happened once or twice before, and it's been reported in some way. And we kind of pushed back on that and saying, no, not every case of abuse is reported. And it doesn't have to be the majority at all. So you can't just randomly say, oh yeah, every case, it's usually happened. There's usually a history. And because there's usually a history and you can't show that we have a history, then guess what? But the history has to be reported by someone. Who would report the history? Has to be somebody, a guardian watching. So a lot of times it would have to be Patsy, or it'd have to be Linda Hoffman-Bue or Nidra. And most of the times, if something happens, it's going to be handled in-house. Oh, JonBenet, don't annoy your brother, or Burke, don't hurt your sister. That's what it's going to be, and that's going to be the end. It's not going to be reported if there's true abuse. But what you might see is JonBenet going to the pediatrician dang near 30 times, once a month. What's going on? And so, like I'm saying before, the point I'm trying to make is that there may not have been documented history of abuse, but that doesn't mean that this abuse came out of nowhere, documented to us in terms of the CPS or the state. But in-house, there may have been a lot of roughhousing. Let me tell you, and let me go ahead and finish this off. I want to finish my notes off. She may have been roughhoused on a regular basis, such that her death may not have been out of anger. This is one possible theory. Her death may not have been out of anger, but over an overabundance of roughhousing. So Buff's 1995 notes say a serious fall. She had a serious fall in the grocery store, enough to warrant a doctor's visit. And then in 1996, she had a finger hurt. So all of these little injuries, a fall in the grocery store that said, let's go to the doctor. That had to be a pretty bad fall. Enough to have the doctor check it out. So she may have just been getting roughhoused. And the roughhousing, was deadly, because, kids don't really think about that stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure some of you have had grandchildren who love wrestling, and some of the moves in wrestling can be detrimental. They can be deadly. And if you think innocently sometimes to you go out and do some of these moves, they could be detrimental. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you do some moves and you don't do them in the right context. Let me say, or in the appropriate atmosphere. Wrestling will, show you people getting slammed through tables and thrown out of the ring and slammed on a cage and being hitting their face on the turnbuckle and all such as that. Really hard things that will injure a person. And so if you are a child of, not even in your teenage years yet, you may not be able to understand, I can't do this DDT on bricks. I can't slam someone's head into bricks in real life. That's not real. They have special protections and precautions that keep them safe. But for me in the real world as a child, I don't yet comprehend that wrestling is theater. It's theater. It's drama. I don't want to say fake because I don't want to offend anyone. But I can't yet comprehend that this is theater. It's drama. And so it could be the case that I'm playing around and I go and I get a sibling and I suplex them into the wall. And they really get hurt off of that. And sometimes this hurt is detrimental because it's like, yo, that was a serious move that you did. That seriously hurt somebody. But I'm a kid. I don't know. And so JonBenet may not have, like I said before, it could be the case that JonBenet may not have died because of malicious intent. She may have died because of roughhousing. Like if it were the case that Burke had a friend over and by accident, these guys are downstairs playing and staying up all night or wherever they're going, the next day. They're flying out the next day, but the garrote is made not as a it's a Boy Scout thing. It's not maliciously made, but it's kind of like a walk the dog kind of. Let's play walk the dog. Let's play cowboys and whatever. Let's play cowboys and horses and stuff like that. Or let's play walk the dog. JonBenet, you're going to be my dog. And, they put essentially the leash around JonBenet. And I'm just coming up with theory. I'm just saying. And so they put the leash around JonBenet and they're walking her. But it could be the case that the leash was too tight. And that's what I mean. When I relate it to like wrestling, the leash could just be too tight. And JonBenet is actually losing air because of it. And what and the child is what'd you say? I can't hear you. And they're not comprehending. No, she really can't breathe. She really can't breathe. She can't. You got to tell me or else I'm gonna pull it tighter. Say uncle, say uncle. She can't say uncle because she really can't breathe. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just sort of coming up with a theory here, suggesting based on the evidence that this might be what happened. And so, you pull it tight, but then all of a sudden she falls and she's turning blue in the face and, she's laying there and she's dead. And so the blow to the head comes from somebody trying to wake you up and saying, hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. Come on, wake up, wake up, wake up. JonBenet. Boom. Going to get if you don't wake up, I'm going to hit you with this bat. All right. 1, 2, boom. And they hit her, and then it's like, okay, you didn't wake up. All right. I'm going to hit you with this bat. And then boom, hit her again. And then could be the case that Patsy was up packing. And so she was like, what the heck is that sound? So she comes downstairs and she sees JonBenet on the ground. JonBenet, 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 JonBenet. That's it. And that's it. JonBenet is down. She's down for the count. What do you think? I'm not saying that it's foolproof. I'm just saying it's possible. That's all I'm saying. But anyways, that's everything. I mean, that's everything. I don't want to belabor the point. That's everything. On this whole thing with Mike Bynum, your boy. That's everything with Mike Bynum. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, as you've been doing. Appreciate the love and support that you guys are continuing to show. So thank you. But let me know what you think. Continue to give me your theories and whatnot. And until next time, make sure you're continuing to take care of yourself. If you're sick, I hope you feel better. If you're not feeling so well, feeling down, just emotionally and mentally, I hope you get to a better place. I hope you get to a better state. and whatnot. And so once again, thank you. And until next video, take it easy.